In 1966, I was, where was I? Yeah, in 1966, I was living in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, with my girlfriend at the time. And I remember I was trying to learn how to be a surfer dude. And we lived right on the beach. The apartment building that we lived in, it was a fourplex, was the last house on 17th Avenue North in Jacksonville Beach, Florida. And if you walked out the front door of our apartment building and took a left and went about 100 yards, you would be in the surf of the Atlantic Ocean. And we lived there for, I don't know, 5 or 6 months. And this was at a time in my life where the United States Army was trying to conscript me into the military to go kill people in Vietnam. It was at this time that I took my pre-induction physical at Jacksonville Naval Air Station. It was also that summer when I was out in the surf. I got stung severely by a Portuguese man-of-war, managed to make it back to shore. My girlfriend put me in her little Austin Healey Sprite and drove me immediately to the nearest beach first aid station, where I got the standard treatment for that kind of a sting. And while I was there, listening to the radio, it was I remember all this very clearly, WAPE, the Big Ape, they used to call it, WAPE in Jacksonville, Florida, 50,000-watt music station, rock and roll. And as I was laying on a cot in the first aid station, after having had my legs scraped with sand and ammonia, and after having been given a couple of antihistamine pills, and I was laying there for the first aid people to wait and see if I needed transporting to the local hospital, which I didn't. But it was pretty damn painful. But I'm laying there on the cot, and all of a sudden the music was interrupted with an announcement that somebody named Charles Whitman, a former Marine, took rifles and other weapons to the observation deck atop the main tower, the main building tower, the University of Texas at Austin. This was after he stabbed his mother and wife to death the night before. But Charles Whitman went to the top of the tower, loaded with weaponry, and opened fire indiscriminately on people beneath him, on the surrounding campus and on the streets. And over the next hour and a half, he shot and killed 15 people, including an unborn child and one final victim who died from his injuries years later. Whitman also injured 31 other people with his gunfire. And the incident ended when a cop and a civilian reached Whitman. They climbed up the tower and shot him dead. Now, on that August day in 1966, the attack was the deadliest mass shooting by a lone gunman in U.S. history. But 18 years later, after several mass shootings, innumerable mass shootings, then occurred the San Isidro McDonald's massacre. That was an act of mass murder which occurred at a McDonald's restaurant in the San Isidro neighborhood of San Diego, California, on July 18th, 1984. The perpetrator of that mass killing was 41-year-old James Huberty. He fatally shot 21 people and wounded 19 others before being killed by a police sniper 77 minutes after he had first opened fire. At the time, that massacre was the deadliest mass shooting by a lone gunman in U.S. history. Until 7 years later, the Luby's massacre is what it became known as. That was a mass shooting that took place in October 1991 at a Luby's cafeteria in Killeen, Texas. That perpetrator, George Hennard, drove his pickup truck through the front window of the restaurant. He quickly shot and killed 23 people, wounded 27 others. He had a brief shootout with police, refusing to surrender as they were telling him. And they then fatally shot himself. And at the time of the Luby shooting, that was the deadliest mass shooting by a lone gunman in U.S. history, being surpassed 16 years later by the Virginia Tech shooting. Do I need to go on? I don't think so. And those shootings were just random examples of multiple deaths. Each one, the number of dead and wounded people superseding the previous one, until we had the situation in Las Vegas a couple of years ago. How many people were killed then? 63. How many wounded? 800. Those numbers, I'm trying to recall from memory. They may be lower or higher, but really in the United States of America, it doesn't matter how many people are killed on a given day. It doesn't matter. Because in this country, we are fucking insane where it concerns guns. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, Mike, not everybody's a mass killer. That's true. But do you know how many guns are available to civilians in this country? More than there are people in this country. There are 340 million, roughly, citizens of the United States. It's estimated there are close to 400 million firearms available to the public. The Indianapolis mayor, if you saw his press briefing this morning, said, quote, "What we are left with this morning is grief." End quote. The authorities in that city said at least 7 other people were injured after 8 killed, 9 actually when you consider that the murderer killed himself. 7 other people were injured in addition to the 9 people dead, including 8 murdered by the gunman and then his suicide. So as I'm recording this Friday morning, late Friday morning, it's almost noon, the authorities were searching for a motive for this. This guy stormed the FedEx facility in Indianapolis late last night and began his murder spree. This is the latest mass shooting in this country in a matter of weeks. This morning, earlier, the police were not either willing or able to identify victims or the gunman. This morning, they said they were still working to contact family members. The authorities said the gunman was believed to have been armed with a semi-automatic rifle. One witness said it was a submachine gun. And apparently he killed himself almost immediately after the shooting. The deputy police chief at that press briefing this morning said, quote, "He, the killer, just appeared to randomly start shooting," end quote. This comes only weeks after back-to-back mass shootings in March here in Atlanta at 2 or 3 spas, and then at a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. Officials used a common word, another, That's the word they used, another, to define the tragedy. The governor of Indiana, Eric Holcomb, said on Twitter this morning, quote, "This is another heartbreaking day, and I'm shaking by the mass shooting at the FedEx ground facility in Indianapolis," end quote. And then the mayor of Indianapolis, Joe Hogsett, condemned, quote, "the horrific news of yet another mass shooting, an act of violence that senselessly claimed the lives of 8 of our neighbors," end quote. Another, and another, and another. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.